If you were in middle school, high school, college, you've recently graduated, or really you just have a beating heart, what we are going to be talking about today can heavily impact your life. It certainly has mine over the last few months. And I have a very important person to talk about this who is very knowledgeable about it. We'll get into it in a minute. But Matt Lencioni, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Hampton. Good to be here.
First off, Lencioni, what is it?
Lencioni. A lot of people
Okay.
say Lencioni, Leniconi, Linguini, but Lencioni.
Linguini. Yeah, I've got this book behind me, The Advantage, and I often said Lencioni, and then I've heard you and your dad and a couple of the people say Lencioni, and I'm like, I think it's that. So I've got it right. It is. We're good from now on. But people are probably wondering, as we're 30 seconds into this, what is this big thing that we are talking about? And I want you to bring it up because you're the guy here. So what is this big thing I'm talking about?
I assume you're talking about the working genius. And I know you took the
Yes,
assessment, but I'd love to take you through it and kind of give you a little bit more context and how it can apply to your listeners and all that. Um,
please.
so where should I start? Yeah, so it's what we were talking about before. It's a productivity tool personality assessment. So a lot of people think it's similar to Myers-Briggs and DISC and the Strengths Finder and all that. And it is, but we like to say it's 80% productivity, 20% personality. So basically there's 6 types of working genius. And I can walk you through those individually. I can walk you through them in relation to your results. But before I do that, so it's a personality assessment that's 80% productivity. It talks about how people fit into the process of work, how we should manage projects, how we can be intentional about the way we staff teams, staff organizations. And yeah, on a personal level, it can help reduce guilt and judgment around what our strengths are, what our frustrations are, what our weaknesses are. And yeah, it's great for teams, it's great for individuals. So I guess I'll walk you through the 6 types first.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So basically the 6 types, there's 6 types of work that everybody either loves, hates, or, is indifferent about. So each person has 2 geniuses, 2 competencies, and 2 frustrations. So our geniuses are things that we love to do. We could do them all day. We get excited about them. It's the first step we take in terms of how we approach a problem. And so those 2, how Pat likes to describe it, and I shouldn't be taking credit for any of this. Pat came up with the model, and then the Working Genius team, Pat, myself, and a couple other people in our office made the assessment, made the certification program, all that. But your geniuses are something that, how Pat describes it, it's like a coffee cup, like a Yeti mug. Like you pour hot coffee into it, it stays hot all day. You can do it all the time, and you'd love it. It feeds you, gives you energy. Your working competencies, which are your next 2, are things that, they're not going to feed you, they're not going to give you joy, and they're going to slowly drain you. So if you do them all the time, you might get burnt out. But it's like a coffee cup, just a normal Starbucks cup. You pour coffee in, it'll stay hot for a while, but if you leave it there for a while, it'll get cold. The frustrations, on the other hand, are like a coffee cup with a hole in the bottom. You start working in your frustrations, you're immediately going to be getting drained, getting burnt out, and it's not something you want to be staying in that area for very long. So the whole kind of personal goal behind it is that we want to do as much work as possible in our geniuses and as little as possible in our frustrations. Even though everyone has to do all 6. You have a job, you have responsibilities, you have everything, and you got to be disciplined about that. But ideally, we want to be spending as much time in the areas that give us joy and as little time in the areas that drain us.
Man, that's awesome. And I think why this can be helpful for anyone, but especially for the majority of our listeners who may be a little bit younger, earlier on in their life or their career, is that many of us, we just choose a specific job or career path because our parents told us it's a good one, or that there's security. And so while there can be some benefits to that, you might just be wired in a way that says, hey, you are not going to be successful here. And one thing that I've loved y'all talking about is that just because something is a frustration doesn't mean that you're bad at it, which means that people can be really, really talented and do a job for their whole career and be amazing at it, but it absolutely drains them. Like the example I've heard y'all talk about is the person that makes it through med school, but tenacity, which we'll get into this in a minute, of one of the geniuses, is a major frustration. And so of course they didn't enjoy med school because there's so much tenacity involved there. And so I think just having the awareness of the way you're wired and what gives you life and energy is what's going to lead to a more meaningful life, career, and ultimately help you avoid things like burnout later on. But like, I would just love to hear, like, what are the geniuses, um, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, of course. So the six geniuses, we like to describe it as the different altitudes. So the first genius is wonder. This is 30,000 feet. This is uh, head in the clouds. This is identifying the problem that needs to be solved. So it's the first step in any project, in any endeavor, is someone saying how identifying a problem and saying this, we need to figure out a way to fix this or to provide something that fixes this, or asking the question. And so that's one of my geniuses. That's something that I do a lot. um, and the first step in work, a lot of people who have wondered, they kind of, and myself included for a very long time, don't really see it as a genius. It's very internal. It's a lot of people see it as questioning the way things are done and being critical of others, but it really is the first step in the process of work. And so once somebody asks the question, says, how can we fix this problem, identifying the problem, the next person comes along, which is the inventor, and says, I'm going to come up with a solution. They love coming up with solutions. Hampton, this is one of your geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the disruptive geniuses. So it's very um, energized and out, and it's not internal, it's external. It's you're sharing ideas with other people. You're disrupting with the new ideas you create. This is one of Pat's geniuses. Um, and however, not everyone's ideas are going to be great. Hampton, you're going to have some bad ideas. So the next
Yes.
person comes along, which is the discerner. This is my other genius. Discerners love to evaluate ideas. They love to curate information. They love to take existing things, whether it's somebody proposing an idea or information that's readily available to them, and kind of fitting it together like a puzzle just to see what's going to be effective. It's about evaluation, curation, all that. And although discerners, they're not always going to be rallying the troops around those ideas. So the next genius is the galvanizer. They're the ones that say, I believe you, that's going to work. I'm going to get everybody else excited about this and fired up, and we're going to actually get people moving on this project, on this idea, on fixing this problem. And then the people that hear that call to action are the enablers, the genius of enablement. These people are just wonderful supporters. Um, Lots of people don't think this is a genius either. They think they're just nice or a pushover, but enablement is huge on a team, because if somebody's telling everybody, getting people rallied around an idea and trying to get people excited and moving, the people with the genius of enablement are the first people that are going to come alongside and help the way somebody needs to be helped. They're absolutely necessary on a team. And the last genius is the genius of tenacity. These are the people that are going to take something from 90 to 100%. They won't rest until it's checked off the to-do list. They love having to-do lists in front of them. They love having objectives, tasks, things that they can pull all the way through to the finish line and make sure that things get done. A lot of the other geniuses, I know I'm a WD, so I, if I don't finish it, like, okay, like, I'm not going to be super bothered by, I like finishing things. I like, there's discipline is separate from the six types, but people with tenacity are the ones that are really going to kick ass and get things done. And they love
Mm-hmm.
just, even if it's mundane, they just love crossing things off a to-do list. And yeah, so like I said, each person has two geniuses, two competencies, and two frustrations. My geniuses and your geniuses are wholly different. I'm a WD and you're an IG. So one thing that's actually interesting about our results is that one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that there's three stages of work. So WI, wonder and invention, that's the ideation stage. That's where people are identifying problems and figuring out ways to solve them. Then the last stage, I'll skip over to ET. That's implementation. So that's helping and getting things done. But a lot of people miss the middle stage, which is activation, discernment, and galvanizing. This is figuring out if an idea is going to work and then spending the time to get everybody excited about that idea. And so one thing that's interesting about our results is that both of us have a genius in ideation and activation. I'm wonder and discernment, and you're invention and galvanizing. Um, and so if me and Hampton were the only two people on the team, uh, we would probably have a lot of good ideas, solve the right problems, you know, identify what the right solution was, get other people excited about it. But we would definitely need some other people to come alongside and help us finish those projects.
Man, that's what's so cool about the working genius is because as you were saying all of that, I knew you would, but I was like, he better mention the ideation and then activation, because that's what me and Matt have. So if the two of us were starting a business, we would need to, which maybe we will one day. I don't know. Throwing that out there. No, but maybe, or not maybe, we would 100% need to find someone else that has enablement and tenacity, whether we outsource something to just make sure that things are getting done. And what I even love is like, imagine, maybe this isn't approved from the Working Genius folks, but the way I might think about it is, you've got the basketball in your hand and you're wondering, which is the first one. So think of the word widget. That's the acronym to help us remember that. WIDGET. So you're wondering, which is actually a frustration of mine. So you're going, I wonder if things could be better. Why are they the way that they are? Where someone like me, I'm like, no. I don't like thinking like that. That drains me. But once you wonder enough and verbalize that to me, I'm like, okay, fine. How about this? Here's my idea. Let's do this. But then you're the discerner and you're like, Hampton, that's a pretty bad idea. Give me another one. Then I come up with another idea, and probably after 5 bad ideas, maybe I have a good one. So then you're like, that's it. And then I galvanize. So then I'm like, guys, let's go do it. But if it was just me and Matt, it would probably stop there. We would need someone to be the encourager, and then the tenacity to push it across the finish line, which I think, what are your competencies?
So I was just about to say that too. So we, enablement and galvanizing are my competencies. So
Okay.
I have enablement as one of my competencies, and you have tenacity as one of your competencies. So if we were going into business and we were going to go through the process of work, like you just described really well, I might add, um, but we would be able to make up for some of it. We would be able to at least cover some of those bases and survive. But it definitely would not be, it wouldn't give us energy. So, like, one thing that Pat doesn't mention a lot about this model that I like to kind of clarify, and I think this is my W, but I like to reinforce the fact that it's idealistic. Like, this is not always going to be possible. Like, every job is a 6-letter job. Everyone has to do what their responsibilities are. They have to have discipline around what their role is, and their role is always going to include all 6. The goal is to make it so we spend as much time in our geniuses as possible and we avoid our frustrations. However, since we have these geniuses, or these types in our competencies, we would be able to make up for that. And we like to say, like, if you work hard, you can make up for it. It's just not going to give you joy. And so I like to, a little disclaimer, it is idealistic. It is, it's not always going to be black and white. Everyone gets to, you don't always just get to invent ideas and get people excited about them all day. That would be awesome. That would be sweet. But you have to do other things. And so there's times where you're going to have to dip into your competencies and even your frustrations. But it's just not ideal. And if you do that too much, it's going to lead to burnout.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've got to be able to do all of them, but just being aware of what gives you joy, that can really help you decide what you want to do, like, with your life. And I know a lot of us, we might be 18, 20, 22, 24 years old. And it's like, okay, thanks, Hampton. I show up to work and my boss just gives me a list of things to do and I've got to check it off. So I hope tenacity is a genius of mine. I know a lot of times earlier in our careers, it probably is more in that enablement tenacity spot. But you and I did not get the chance, I don't think, well, I didn't, but for you to take this in college, to understand that. So as a college student, why should I take the Working Genius? What could that help me with?
So I think talking about how I went about finding work when I was in college and when I was leaving college probably would shed some light on why this would have been helpful. So when I was in school, I had 2 internships when I was in college. I worked as a sales and lead gen for a company down close to where I went to school, and then I worked as another business development representative, and I also did lead gen, and then a lot of other tasks for a startup. So I did a little bit more there. And because I had those 2 jobs, both were sales roles, like lead gen sales roles. I When I was looking for a job after college, I just thought, yeah, I'll get a sales job because that's what I've been doing. And I never really stopped to ask myself, oh, did I like those jobs? Was I excited to do those jobs? And I liked having the job. I liked the people I worked with, but the tasks that I was doing all day were definitely not a strength of mine, nor were they something that I enjoyed. And I don't know if other people do this more than I did, but I never stopped to think, oh, is this because of how I'm wired or because of the strengths and weaknesses that I have? I thought it was because I was lazy.
Mm.
I thought I was just not good at work, and that I, I did my job and I did my job well, but it was a grind. And if I had stopped to think, oh, what are actually my strengths, and if I had a model like this to say, oh, what do I want to do all day? What do I actually want to do for work? What are the things that I bring to the table that are actually going to be beneficial for the place that I'm working with? It's going to give me energy at the same time. And I just never asked myself that question. So when I started looking for jobs after I left college, I thought, well, I've been in 2 sales roles. Like, that's what's on my resume. That's what I'm going to keep doing, I guess. And I kept looking for sales jobs, and luckily it was a blessing that I guess the Working Genius did help me figure out what job I was going to do, because my dad came up with the idea for the Working Genius right as I
Yeah.
was leaving college and said, we need help developing this product, and I know you have experience with assessments and analysis, statistics, and um, so it was a blessing that I got brought on when I did, because I actually got to use my geniuses, and it was the first time that I thought, oh, I actually am contributing out of the areas that give me joy. And um, so I guess the Working Genius did help me when I was leaving college to figure out what kind of job I wanted to do. But if this hadn't come about, I would have gotten a sales job and gone right back
Yep.
into something that I would have just made me keep thinking that I was lazy. And
Mm.
it's funny because you are a salesperson and you're an IG. So you stumbled into a role that actually does feed your geniuses. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I look at my friends and my little brothers, and I just want everybody to be able to figure out what gives them joy, because being stuck in a job that drains you sucks. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I bet, man. And I'm so glad that you were able to to figure out, what your geniuses were, and now you're able to work more towards those, and then you're helping people like your younger brothers and friends learn about it. And for me, you're right. I did stumble into a job that serves me well. And I think right out of college, for many people, it's probably going to be difficult to uh, get some inventing opportunities. I
Hmm.
might be wrong, but I think a lot of places it's like, hey, no, you just kind of do your
Yeah.
job. But
Stay in your lane.
I'm in more of a startup environment, and I'm almost required to invent in certain areas. And so that's been awesome. And I'm grateful that our director of marketing, our director of sales, my boss, they're both discerners. And so they are like, whoa, hold your horses. One of those four was a good idea. Run with that. And then I galvanized from there, which has been a ton of fun. But tell me about, you and I both share this experience, which I feel like is a bonding experience. Imagine a business getting a new CEO every year. It's basically probably destined to fail eventually. Well, that's basically what fraternities are. And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah.
they get that new president every year, and you're trying to pass along the information. It takes 6 months to figure out what you're doing, and then you've got 6 months to kind of do it from there. But we both got to do that in college, and man, how helpful would it have been to understand the Working Genius for yourself, but then the rest of like the exec team. I was fortunate enough to talk to the current president of my fraternity right now. Shout out Trip Green. And I kind of walked through this with him the other day, and he's like, man, we got to do this with our team. But what, you think that would have been helpful to have when you were in college?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When I became president of my fraternity, I didn't really understand why, because I did a good job. I did my job, um, and yeah, I did a good job, but I was tired pretty quickly. And if I had known about the Working Genius, and I knew that galvanizing was a competency for me, it's not something, rallying the troops, getting everybody excited about things isn't something that's going to give me joy all the time. And that is your job as president. That's what you have to do. And so I loved making decisions. I loved looking at everything that we had to do and figuring out what would be the best for everybody, and working with other people and trying to plan things and figure out what's going to work. That was great. I loved that. But then it came to, disseminating all that information and communicating all this to everybody. And that drained me. And if I had known about the working genius, I definitely would have delegated that kind of thing to people around me, because there were a lot of people around me that loved that. And looking back, I can think of so many people on the executive team that would have easily ran with that. The story that my dad always tells about the table group is that he was galvanizing is also a competency for him, and he was getting drained at work. He was, I don't know why I'm tired. I don't know why I'm grumpy, and kind of the same feeling that I had when I was kind of rallying the troops in my fraternity and in my lacrosse team. And he delegate when we came up with a working genius, he began delegating the galvanizing to Cody. And I think you've talked to Cody a number of times now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a discerner galvanizer, and so Pat deputized him as his chief galvanizing officer. And Cody loves that. That's Cody's favorite thing to do, is to rally the troops, get people excited about things, tell people what they need to be doing. And since it drains Pat, he gave all that to Cody. And immediately he says that it was like a weight off his shoulders, that he was just able to do what he loves, and then trust that Cody was actually going to do that for him. And that's despite how people see leaders often, is they expect them to be the ones that are great at galvanizing, that they're the ones that are rallying the troops, like inspiring everybody and getting in front of everybody with a microphone. And I think that kind of relates to one thing we always say is, like, the best type for a leader is a self-aware one. There's no best type for a leader. It's just how they're going to lead is going to be different. And in service of that, we need to delegate other people to help us in the areas that we're not going to be, that aren't going to give us energy. So that's definitely
That's
something
awesome.
that I would have loved to have when I was in college, especially in that leadership role, because it would have helped me a lot. It would have helped the people around me.
Yeah, I bet, man. And you mentioned you played lacrosse, college lacrosse too. You were a goalie,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, sir.
Dude, that's awesome. So you were I don't know a ton about lacrosse. I'm probably going to embarrass myself talking about this, but were you galvanizing from the back, you know, yelling at everybody to get after it, and it was draining sometimes for you?
Actually, it's interesting, and I was thinking about this the other day, because I was the president of the lacrosse team and captain and everything, and the goalie is kind of the quarterback of the team. When you've got your defense there, you're the one yelling. Like, your job is to yell, stop the ball and yell. And I actually really liked it was interesting. I liked telling everybody what to do on the lacrosse field, because I was absolutely certain that I knew where everybody needed to be. So I think it was
Mm,
actually partially discernment, that, like, I could see the whole field from the goal. I could tell everybody where to be. I had the best perspective on where everyone is, and I could order people to slide and to pick up other people's guys and rotate, and, what defense we're going to be set up in. And so I think because I was confident in my abilities, like, as a discerner, and because I had perspective on, could see the whole field, and I think I was good at that, that it actually made up for the fact that galvanizing was a frustration, because I was constantly just making decisions and figuring out what's going to work. And so on lacrosse field, it was different. Off the field, it was annoying. You know, a college lacrosse team has a bunch of idiots on it, and I love
mm,
every single person that I played with. But you really have to rope people around. Like, when you travel and people are being idiots and staying out past curfew, I hated being the person to have to, uh, you know, get everybody to follow instructions and do what they need to be doing. And so, even though I did a good job, and, it was my job, so I took it seriously and um, did it well. It definitely was something that drained me off the field. On the field, it was different. I could tell people where to be all day.
mm.
But yeah, so
That's cool.
pretty much the same situation as in my fraternity. It was like, if I had known all this, I wouldn't have felt guilty when I felt like I was doing less good of a job than I could have been doing. That when I felt more tired than I would have expected myself to be, and I would have been able to let go of the guilt around that stuff and just realize, like, oh, I can rely on, one of the other captains to be the chief reminding officer, chief galvanizing officer, chief accountability officer, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, it would have been real useful.
Yeah, I bet. Well, it's even interesting as you've shared that, because it sounds like you're galvanizing from the back as the goalie, and in some sense you are. But you mentioned it's a lot of discernment too, because I mean, you can see the whole field and you're discerning like what's wise and where people should move. And for me, I don't know if that's like a huge if even if I was playing goalie, if that would be a strength of mine, because when I think of galvanizing, and maybe I have this wrong, you can correct me, but a lot of times it's just kind of like running up to everybody and be like, come on guys, let's go. And there's
Yeah.
like not a lot of, there's not always substance to it. It's just kind of like energy and like, let's do it. But for you, when there was like a real direction to give, which in that case was maybe discernment, maybe that's why it made a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and because I was never the guy that would come into the huddle and inspire everybody. I didn't know what I would say, and I'm sure an IG would absolutely stand up there and get on their big old soapbox and be able to just rally everybody and get everybody excited. I'd get to the huddle, and people would look to me for. Luckily, I had other guys on the team that naturally, they were probably IGs, that naturally would get into the huddle and just, regardless of whether or not they were a captain or a senior or anything, they would just start getting everybody excited because they cared, which was
Yeah.
awesome. But when I got into the huddle, I'd be, a WD is responsive. I don't know if I explained the different responsive and disruptive geniuses, but I would just, if people said, Matt, what do you got? I'm like, do your jobs. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna have some awesome, inspiring speech. If I have some time to write one, maybe it'd be good. But IGs and geniuses that are similar to that, those other guys on the team that could walk into the huddle and they were immediately just like, all this really great stuff that they would just off the top of their head just communicate to the team and get everybody excited. And that was a blessing for me, because if everybody was looking to me constantly for that, I don't know what I'd even say. I'd get into the huddle, do your job, let's get back out there, you know.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so we do need each other. That's one of the cool things about this model, is that like it actually prescribes how you need each other. Like we described earlier, how if we work together, we would be relying on each other for certain geniuses. We could go up to each other and ask specifically for that. And when somebody's asked for their genius, like if I'm like, hey, Hampton, I need you to go rally, I need you to go get everybody excited. That's awesome. That's doesn't mean I have to do it. And it means that you get to do something that you actually love to do. So yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Well, maybe we didn't get to have the working genius in college, but if you're in college, please take it, learn it, understand it. It's going to help you currently and in your career. Um, I'd love to hear, if you don't mind sharing just a little bit more about you and even some of your story of, you finished up college and then now you're at the table group. But I know we've talked a lot about the working genius, but I want to know about you too.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so, like I said, I played lacrosse and I was in a fraternity in college. And so I went to Santa Clara University down in California and had a great time, a little too great of a time. And then I ended up working at the table group shortly after school. That was right around when COVID hit. I'm sure you graduated, I think, at the same exact time. Yeah. hmm
Yeah.
So I started the table group, and like I said, it was a blessing to start when I did, because I got to immediately come in and start doing what I like to do in service of the working genius. So right when we came up with right when Pat came up with the model, the idea, I got brought on to help develop the assessment, and that was what we started with. And now, almost 3 years later, we've got a certification program and tons of resources and a podcast that I think we've got like 40 something episodes done on. And we've got, I think, 1,500 people certified in the model. Um, but when I started, it was just, yeah, we got this model, we need to make an assessment. And so I got to do all the statistical analysis and reliability and validity testing and all that stuff. So it really was a blessing to be able to join the table group when I did. And I've been loving it here ever since. Um, but yeah, I guess one thing that I think would be kind of, there's a lot of things, like I said, the working genius, I wish I heard when I was in college. And I don't think I've talked a lot about this yet, but the idea of guilt and judgment around the working
Hmm.
genius. When I started here, I actually didn't want to get a job with my dad. Um, Not because it was of the stigma around it. Like I actually thought like it would be cool to work here, but I thought that I was lazy, and I thought that I just hadn't developed a work ethic yet, and I thought that I was just uh, not good at work. And looking back, I know that it would have been great to know that I had a frustration with tenacity, a frustration with invention, because a lot of people um, see tenacity as something that, everybody needs to have discipline, but tenacity is like a gift. It is a gift, and some people are great at it and some people struggle with it, and I'm one of the people that struggle with it. And so, without knowing that that was a frustration of mine, I got really down on myself when I felt like I was being drained by normal work that some other people seem to be really good at. And so I thought I was lazy, and so I thought I definitely can't go work for my dad's company before I develop a work ethic. And it was kind of, I know, like looking back, I'm like, yeah, I have plenty of discipline. I work hard, I care. And I bring value, but at the time I couldn't see any of that because I just thought I was lazy. And so I was looking for sales jobs. Um, when I was graduating, which again, not the right move. But yeah, so it took me a while into work here to actually feel like I was like confident and that I was adding value and that that I deserved it here, because also there is a stigma around working for your dad.
Mhm.
And so even though I know that I bring value here, it took me a while to feel like I actually deserved to work here, and to be in the position that I had been brought on for. But yeah, working on the Working Genius was a real blessing for that, to actually give me that.
Mm.
So
That's awesome, man. I think it's so cool talking about just feeling guilt about feeling like you're lazy. I feel like a lot of people feel like that. And I've been coming, I've been becoming like obsessed with different generations and some of the older generations, due to the way that they grew up and everything. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with this, but they might say, well, just show up to work, work hard. Like you're lazy if you don't. And while I think that hard work is important and discipline is important, now understanding like your wiring, I think that's really helpful. And I just really hope that more and more companies and organizations will have leaders that are self aware, but then also really desire to understand their people. And so that's kind of the
mhm.
world that I'm in with Wild Spark. And I know the Working Genius is just helping a ton with that. So love how everything worked out. And even it just speaks to the leader of who Pat is and everybody else at the table group too. Um, just kind of understand who you are and say, no, 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 no. Your wonder and discernment is incredibly valuable here. And you're gonna have to be tenacious sometimes. Oh, you got to share this. What when you have to get in kind of a tenacity mode, what do you call that?
Oh yeah, the T zone, the T cave. Yeah,
Dude, I love that.
um so I, even when I say this stuff that like, oh, I can avoid feeling guilty for not having tenacity as a genius. That is as far from an excuse as it could possibly be, because obviously I still have to do it. I still have to have discipline around my job. I still have to do what my responsibilities are. I still have to do my damn taxes. I still have to, I can't avoid that. But I can be, what I like to say is aware and intentional about it. I like to say, even outside of the Working Genius, I think if we're aware and intentional, it's hard to go wrong, like in any
Mhm.
situation. If we're aware of other people, ourselves, what's going on around us, and we're intentional about the way we speak to people and we get things done and we spend our time, I think just those two things, I think, are just super important, at least in the way I live my life and the way I go about my day. But with tenacity, so I needed a way to, I mean, I had plenty of tenacity work. I was handling all the statistical analysis for the Working Genius, and we were testing thousands of people with the beta. And I was the youngest person on the team, so I'm the de facto technology person. And I took a couple of statistics classes in college. So I was like, okay, this is discernment. Like I get to use my discernment and aggregate information and curate, but it's a lot of, I mean, I call it monkey work just because it's like typing, you imagine a monkey just slamming his fingers on the keyboard. It's just grunt work. It's just hours and hours of that kind of thing. And so when I was doing the statistical analysis to see which questions made sense, what we needed to tweak, when I was doing the validity and reliability testing, which was a lot of data analytics and numbers and all that, I had to lock myself in a room for hours at a time just to make sure I got it all done. And this is kind of a backdoor into developing skills around our frustrations. Like we don't want to spend all our time in it, but if we can kind of reframe each task into um, better fitting our geniuses and be aware and intentional, like I said, it can make it so it doesn't drain us as much. So what I would do is I would tell my team that I was going to the T zone, or I like the T cave. And I would just go in there and I would lock the door, and I would not come out of a room until I got what I needed to get done. So I would sit in there and hammer away at these Excel spreadsheets for hours. And I was actually able to sit there, and because I knew that it was confined to a certain time, because I knew that I was only going to have to grind for a certain amount of time, and that once I got it done I could leave the room, and it actually made it so it drained me a lot less, even though it was still one of my frustrations. And not only did it give me more energy in general, it just made it so I could actually get that work done instead of procrastinating or doing something else, or avoiding it. So I think T is one of the more straightforward ones when we're trying to find workarounds. and ways to reframe. But with all of Six Geniuses, there's ways that we can reframe um, the the nature of the task to better fit what we're good at and what we enjoy.
Yeah. Dude, that's so good. I've been going to the Tea Cave lately, just like blocking it on the calendar because everybody's gonna have to do that. You have to do your taxes, like you said, at some point. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I love how you said that your dad and your mom. I don't think either of them have tenacity, and so they forgot to pay the power bill or something one month. Or I heard him
Oh yeah.
talking about that, which I think is hilarious. May not be a whole lot of tenacity in the Lencioni household.
No, there's none. Um, but yeah, like I said, knowing that we don't have tenacity is a way that we actually get around the fact that none of us have tenacity. So we can
Yeah.
actually be intentional about being like, oh, I need to spend time. My mom does the same thing with the T zone. She doesn't call it that, but I mean, I'll lock her in a room and have her get her stuff done.
That's awesome, man. Well, as we're kind of wrapping up here, just this might be me putting you on the spot a little bit, but knowing that a lot of our listeners are a little bit younger, and the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of this is to really help people just kind of wake up and lead themselves and take ownership of their life. Is there anything, any knowledge, wisdom, advice, life experiences that you might have to just say, hey, be like this or don't do this?
I don't think so. I'm still learning everything too. I think I've learned a lot in the past few years. I was telling you a little bit about it before we started recording, about how in the last couple years, even since I started the table group, I've gone through personal stuff, anxiety and depression and all that, and I've had to go into treatment for that type of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I think I definitely I can't preach to anyone because I definitely still figuring everything out. But one thing that I like to say is one day at a time. Like people ask me about the future, and like yeah, I got a meeting tomorrow. Like it's Wednesday, um, and one other thing is just kind of, and it's kind of in the same vein as Working Genius, but just like I said, aware and intentional. If I can be aware about how I'm feeling and aware about how other people are perceiving me, and be intentional about the way I spend my time, the way I go about my day, the way I have discipline around things, um, and identify what I like to do and invest in that, and try to find things that are good for you that you enjoy, and just do
Mm.
more things that are good for you and that you enjoy. All these things are things that I've learned the hard way in terms of, being in your early 20s and doing things that don't serve you in the long run and don't serve you in the short term either. Um, but in terms of things that I kind of anchor myself around,
Yeah.
it's find things that are good for you and that you enjoy. Keep doing them. Um, and yeah, I hope none of that sounded soapboxy, but those are things that I
Mm-mm.
just are really valuable to me that I've learned um,
Yeah.
as I've, you know, grown up in the last couple of years since college,
Mhm.
that I hope, makes sense at least.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate you sharing and then even just being open about struggling with some anxiety and depression and going to treatment and everything. Like, um, I think a lot of times we get isolated, and we don't have much community around us, or we're not really thinking intentionally, like you were talking about our lives and what we really care about and what we want our purpose to be and the legacy we want to leave. And so because of that, we might just start drifting. And
Mm-hmm.
someone I know really well, Josh Etris, often says, we never drift to our desired destination, you know? And so if you just are not really thinking about like, where do I want to go? Where am I being called to go? Um, that bad things can happen. So I love the advice of just like finding what gives you energy and joy and then pursuing that. And the Working Genius, I was listening to an episode from y'all's podcast the other day. It's not a magic pill. It doesn't solve every problem or answer every question, but I think that self-awareness is a huge part of being a good leader. I mean, you probably can't be a good leader without that. And I think the Working Genius is one of the best ways to become self-aware. So I'm going to put the links to everything below for people to look you all up. I mean, there's so much to learn from these guys. And I just really appreciate you joining me, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. And I can't leave without saying, one other thing that I've learned is God is good. One thing that I say often, one prayer that I say like tons of times every day is, I just like thinking that, like I say, all right, you see me working, you see me trying, and he's like, yeah, you're fine, you know.
Mm,
So that's one thing I try to do every day that I want to
mm.
leave people with. But yeah,
Amen.
thanks so much for having me, Hampton. This has been really
Yeah.
fun talking about this. I don't always love going on our podcast. We have a couple podcasts that I rarely speak on, but it's been really fun talking to you about this, and you made it real easy for me. So I
Ah,
appreciate it.
awesome, man. Yeah, for those of you listening, I've heard Matt a little bit on some of the Table Group and Working Genius podcasts, and they always joke about how he's there, he's taking notes, he's making sure it happens, but he doesn't always speak. So I'm glad I got you to speak some, and then also to the point you just made of, I think it brings up something really good of like God already approves of you. Like you don't have to clean yourself up, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be the hardest worker or the loudest galvanizer in the room. Which, by the way, I think cool, awesome. Galvanizing is a genius for me, but so often people are great galvanizers with little character, and that leads to a miserable life later on. So, like, even as someone that has that, it's like, okay, maybe I can inspire people at times, but I also like don't. I'm always trying to be mindful of not trying to do that to like elevate myself, but really the best leaders are elevating others. And just, I'm kind of going on a rant, but even just like as God looks at us, it's like we don't have to prove anything for him. We just have to be obedient to what he's called us to do. So thank you for sharing that. And, I definitely got to end this with getting you to tell everybody to wake up and lead. So I'm about to say it here. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. It's time for you and me.
To wake up and lead.
Let's go. Thanks, man.